So what happens when you find yourself in a situation where you're pulled in different ways? One of the things that we try to produce in our graduates is that it would be as easy for them to consult on an ethical matter as it is on a clinical matter. So that when there's either that cognitive dissonance or something in the pit of my stomach, or oftentimes say if you're walking home or driving home and you're replaying, you say like, gee, I don't know if what we did today was good, or I don't know, or I have this decision that I've got to make and I'm not sure which way to go. I want, first of all, through a process of self-awareness, for individuals to be pretty clear about what informs their moral judgments. And one of the important questions that I think we ask is, what are the criteria that you would use to evaluate a good response in this situation? And I think we don't ask that question often enough, because sometimes it's simply, it doesn't move me out of my comfort zone. Or for an administrator, it might be, it doesn't cost us money. Or it keeps us out of the front page of the Washington Post. And those are very different answers than people are better off. My integrity is preserved. It's consistent with the standards of the profession. I oftentimes will say to people, to whom are you responsible? And you ask a group of clinicians that, and some will say, well, to my patient, to my boss. Some will say to my team, some will never say. Some people put themselves first, to me. Some people never put themselves there. I always wonder, if I was asked that question cold, would God make my list? Am I responsible to God? And then when there's conflict, how do you negotiate that? If you can't satisfy all the parties, who trumps? And that's a powerful question. So am I willing to sacrifice my relationship with God so that I'm okay with my clinical instructor or with my spouse? So I want people to think carefully about what it is that informs everyday decision making, and when they're feeling that conflict, to sit down with respected individuals. And that might be a spiritual director who plays that role. Sometimes it's just a wise, good person that one respects. But I think that type of awareness, self-awareness, is oftentimes lacking. If we think back to development courses that we've taken, and Erik Erikson's stages of development, the last challenge is ego integrity versus despair. And I liken that to the Genesis account of creation, where after each day of creation, God looks at what He's created and says, this is good. And I think at the end of life, we need to be able to hold our life in front of us in a peace and be able to say, this is good. Now, we can only do that if we've been reflective along the journey. And we look at compromises that we've made, or feel like making, or are attempted to make. And if we live with them without addressing them, then I'm not surprised that people are afraid to die. And it's easy, I think, to bury all this. And it's what, I mean, universal spiritual needs: meaning and purpose, love and belonging, forgiveness. To be able to forgive ourselves, to be able to forgive others. So that's a long answer to a question, is there a hierarchy of principles? You know, when people say, what do you go to? Well, there's a million books on ethics. There's scripture. But each one of us has to get something that works for us in our individual lives. You've got the 10 Commandments. Well, what does that have to say about embryonic stem cell research? Well, maybe it does. It talks about killing. But what does it have to say about prenatal genetic diagnosis? I mean, so what are those foundational principles that guide us? I can't give you a list that's hierarchically ranked.